Welcome to the Simply Real Life podcast. I'm Sarah, the founder of Simply Real Health, here to help you simplify, amplify, and elevate your life. This show is for those of you who want the real talk on how to live a more intuitive and intentional life, a life that's healthy from the inside out, and one that feels more effortless, aligned, simple, and more alive. We cover it all, from health, wellness, mindset, motherhood, daily habits and rituals, to business and relationships, creativity and growth, and tiny tricks to feeling your best, and the energetics behind it all filled with personal stories, unfiltered conversations, and of course, answering all of your burning questions, all in the way of simplicity and keeping it real, so that you can create your own version of your healthiest life. Let's do it. Hi, guys. Welcome back to the show today. In today's episode, I wanted to share something short, something sweet, and something perfect for the summer season. I don't know about you, but there's something to me about summer that feels like there's a little bit more time and space. Maybe it's because the days are longer, but it can be such a busy season, I think, depending on what life season that you are in, but usually filled with a lot more social time, a lot more plans, a lot more things with friends, a little bit more of a flexible schedule, especially if you have kids and they're out of school. So it can be one of the times people get a little disconnected from themselves. And I think about that especially so with eating in particular, because we're doing a lot more activities, we're on the go a lot more, there's more things going on, more factors, I think, through the day that it can be a time where people get a little bit tired, exhausted, and a little bit disconnected from themselves and what they feel good with, whether that's food or people or habits or behaviors. And one of the best ways, whenever at least I feel off or a little bit disconnected, is to pull out my journal. I've gone through so many stages and seasons with the concept of journaling, but it has been something for the most part since I've been maybe in middle school that I've always been drawn to. And I do think that there's a lot of magic to be found in getting even 10 minutes of quiet to sit down and write. Like there's something so powerful and so potent. I know they've done studies on this. When you actually sit down with a pen to paper versus a computer that you're typing at or on your phone, there's something different that happens in your brain chemistry where all of a sudden we're able to access stuff that's floating around in our minds, that we're carrying around on our hearts, things that are oftentimes subconscious that we're dealing with or processing with or thinking through, but we may not even know that we're doing so. And so to me, journaling is one of the quickest and easiest ways to access what's really going on and how do I really feel, to really help you reflect and take a quick inventory on how you feel like you are showing up in your life. It can be used for a lot of different things. So when you are going through a harder or more tough time, to be able to process through all the thoughts and why you feel that way, and hopefully get to the point where once you've dumped it all out on the page, to be like, what can I do about it? Like, what things are here for me to learn? Where you can see yourself almost from an outside perspective. And so it's one of the many reasons and many tools I feel has been so helpful in my own life in various seasons. And I think it would be a great time to share with you some of my favorite journal prompts and questions, especially in a time of year where we might need a little bit of extra time or space or alone time. Talking to any of the moms out there, just a few minutes even. I know it's so easy to tell ourselves, and I know this from firsthand experience, that we don't have time. It has to be this big, elaborate process, and it has to be an hour long. It has to be in total silence. It has to be the perfect ambiance. These are all the reasons and excuses that I always tell myself, like, I don't have time. But every time I make the time to do this, I'm like, that was easy. That felt really good. And I come away with these nuggets of wisdom and these little ahas of things that keep me going and keep me inspired and motivated to live my healthiest life and live as the best version of myself. And we all need that accountability. And so I just love this as a way for a little extra personal reflection time, little alone time, whatever you need it to be. I think it can be used for all of these different things in different times. And so today I just wanted to share some of my favorite things that I love asking myself, especially on days where I'm like, I know I need to do this, but I'm not sure exactly what to say or what to ask myself. So these are a list of questions that I have on my phone to give me some ideas to go with. Okay, so here they are. Number one is, what am I most proud of? And this could either be this past month, this past season, this past week. You choose the time frame that works for you for so many of these questions. But what am I most proud of? Such an epic question, because we have this tendency as humans and the way that our brains work, we don't acknowledge it. We sweep it under the rug and we are always on to the next thing. What else am I not doing right? What else is ahead? What else is there to do? Versus seeing what you are consistently doing, the ways that you are showing up for yourself. It's really important to acknowledge that, for your brain to recognize that you are doing stuff and acting in ways that you are proud of and in ways that make you feel really good and really aligned to this vision of your healthiest self, whatever that may look like to you. It can be a tough question, but it's also something that I do like to challenge myself with from time to time. And they could be the tiniest things, like things that nobody else maybe around you would know, even your husband or your spouse or close family members, but what's something that is a win for you? And having a list and a place where you can keep adding to that list can be such a powerful practice in recognizing and also remembering to not only be fixated on the things that are not done versus where you are in the present moment. Okay, second question I love is, what ways did I love spending my time? Again, this could be the past month, this past season, this past week, this day. What ways do I love spending my time? You could also phrase it like, what things are lighting me up right now? And making a list of those, because it's really important to categorize in your brain. These are the things that are life giving to me. These are the things that really do make me feel like time passes quickly. These are the moments when I feel the most present, the most engaged, or the most appreciative, like in that state of gratitude. And what ways of spending your time and what things are you doing when you get that sensation? It is so important to recognize those, because we oftentimes need those things way more often in our daily lives than we think that we do. And it's different for everyone. The things that are life giving or the things that you're loving spending your time doing, this could change, and it could change pretty often. So it's great to have some sort of quick list to go to of these things ground me, they center me, they make me feel more like myself, they make me happy. And knowing that will help you start to prioritize those things in your life a little bit more. Number three, what is the biggest lesson that I'm learning right now? Or what have I been learning this month, this season, this week, this past day? Just the recognition that we are always learning, that we are usually always working through something or trying to figure something out, that none of us are perfect, and being able to catch times and places where the same thing may be repeating for you. I mean, I have this theory that life gives you the things, and if you are not listening, if you're not paying attention, if you're not open to learning that lesson, then oftentimes it keeps getting bigger and bigger. The circumstances get bigger, there's more at stake. If you ignore the things that are happening, then they do start to build and they become these bigger things. And it's that slight recognition of we're all working through something, and life has this beautiful way, I think, of handing us the things that we most need to learn. And sometimes we'll see repeating patterns in those things. So it's just a really great area to keep tracking and noticing if there are patterns of certain things that you seem trying to learn, and how often those things do come up in your daily, weekly, or seasonal life. Okay, number four is, what am I nervous about or trying to figure out right now? And I think maybe even more important that that question is, once you have that list of what things am I mulling over or considering or processing, and once you have that list, I think the more important question is what comes after, which is, what things help me figure that out? So a lot of times we have these things in our minds, we are looping constantly, but we never get anywhere. And so this practice of writing it down. What things are you looping about right now? And then what would actually help me get there? So then you're creating this action step or plan out of the looping, a plan out of the incessant thinking that doesn't help and creates this low grade stress in our bodies. But what things would actually help me move through that, process that, have some sort of breakthrough, or take some sort of action so that it's not something that's feeling stuck and stagnant, which is super important. Okay, number 5 is, and this is my favorite question of all time, and you will probably know this if you are a listener of this podcast, but it's how do I want to feel? How do I want to feel in my life right now? Then it also leads to the question of, well, how am I feeling right now? And then where's the delta of that to where I want to be? And that then forces the question, what acts or behaviors or habits help me feel the way that I want to feel? You're identifying the feeling of what you're wanting to go for, but then you're also creating this note to yourself, hey, these are the things that help you get there. Are you doing those things? Like, is there anything else we could try or do or ways to shake it up? I mean, so many of these questions stem from the fact that our brains get stuck so often. They just loop and they cling onto stuff and they don't really process it until we can subconsciously help our brains move along the line. And then what? And why is that happening? And then what? And what can I do about it? I find that that is the most helpful part of journaling is once you get it out, what do I think I could do about this? Instead of, I guess, waiting for answers. There's so much wisdom to be sourced within ourselves, but we have to pause and ask ourselves questions in order to help push us along. Next one is, what's something new that I want to try or learn? And this can be a totally open-ended question. It doesn't have to be that you need to try or learn now, but maybe over the course of your life, even. This is an interesting question. Like, what hobbies, activities, sports, things that you look at and you're like, oh, that's fun, or that's cool, or that's interesting, or I've never done that before. Having a list like that is fun. And you may not always have all of the extra time in this moment or this season, but having a list of things that maybe when you do, have times or seasons of, yeah, that would be interesting. Doing something new helps our brain grow and like helps us stay engaged and challenged with things. It's the opposite of getting too comfortable in your life. So being a newbie, being a beginner at something, what do you want to learn, whether it's a subject matter or it's an activity, that constant state of you are always growing. You will always be trying something new. And that thrill that comes from that is a really important thing to capture. Okay, next question is, what are my top 3 priorities right now? Cuts through a lot of noise, cuts through a lot of negotiations that you're having with yourself or feeling overwhelmed on your schedule or saying yes to too many things. What are your top 3 priorities right now? Such a clarifying question that's so simple and will help reframe things, especially if you are feeling stressed or that you're not sure what to focus on or just feeling a little scattered. Super helpful. Okay, here's one of my favorites too. How can I make this easy or more fun? This is something I probably ask myself at least once a week, journaling it out. Oftentimes, I find I will get so many more answers than if I rhetorically ask myself that question, whether it's something that you're stuck on or just feeling overwhelming, or there's a decision that you have to make, or things are not feeling as lighthearted and fun and feeling a sense of dread or dragging through things. Like, how can you make this easy? How can you make it more simple? And how can you make it more fun? Such a helpful question. Okay, here's another one. What's something that I am afraid to do? And then how would it feel if I just did it anyways? This is one of the guiding principles in my life, but fear is not a reason to turn back or a reason to not do something. In fact, the more often you can practice that sense of feeling fear or a little bit nervous or a little bit scared of doing something is always when you're going to see the most growth. It's always when you are going to feel your best, you're going to feel your proudest, you're going to feel the most accomplished by doing things that you are afraid of or intimidated of. And so naming it and recognizing it. So much of this is about trying to get to the point of things. Like, what is it? Can we name it out loud? That takes away some of the power that it might have over you. And then also noting, but how would it feel on the other side? Because too often we let the uncomfortable feeling of fear and that uncomfortable sensation, honestly, in our bodies stop us before we even start something. And all the juicy good stuff is on the other side. It's just a good challenging question to ask yourself and to get honest with yourself about what the answer is. Okay, what advice would you give yourself 1 year ago today? Oh, I love this question so much. It's so fascinating what you come up with when you can think and reflect on the last year and thinking about advice to your younger self. What are the biggest lessons that you have learned and acknowledging them so that they're not things that you keep repeating into the future? Number 11 is 20 years from now, what do you want your life to look like? 20 years from now. Yes, you could change the timeline of that number. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. What do you want your life to look like? How do you want it to feel? And then on the flip side, what do you not want it to look like? What are things that you already know that you're like, I hope I am not a person who is like this or who does this or acts in this way? What do you also not want? Can be just as interesting of a question. Again, give you some red flags to be aware of. How could I prevent that or do my best at avoiding that or making sure that that's something that is not going to be a huge part of my story down the road? A lot of these answers will probably also start to inform, well, why am I not doing these things now? If I see them in my future, are there any ways that I could pull that into my life now? And maybe it's in small ways, but why are you waiting until you're in a different season, until you're older? Like a lot of times we have this fantasy that the future is only going to be easier when, or like, I'll do that when I lose the weight. I'll do that when I'm a little bit older. I'll do that when I have more free time. But are there elements of things that you could be doing now, maybe just at a smaller scale or smaller capacity? It's a really interesting question to challenge our brain. Okay, here is another one that I also like to ask myself often to take a little inventory on things. But what things give you energy right now? On the flip side, what things drain it? This is actually a great question to be asking pretty often because it can change. Even season to season, like every couple months, I find there are different things that light me up or different things that I'm super energized by or excited about. And then also different things that I'm like, all of a sudden, this thing I used to love or have been doing for a long time, maybe out of habit, all of a sudden it's just like not feeling as good anymore or as helpful. And so that act of refreshing your life when it needs to be, instead of letting things get so stale and so autopilot that you just don't really recognize, and then you're just going through the motions on things, but they don't have that sense of deep feel behind them, especially for what you're going for, especially when you're looking for living your life in a much more aligned and intentional way. It does require reflecting, like, where am I at right now? We're always changing, we're always growing. We go through different things in life, and being able to ask yourself and answer those questions honestly can be such a helpful gauge in what you are saying yes to and what you want more of in your life and the things that you are no longer available for, or you are trying to lighten the load on those things. Okay, the last one is to pick 3 people that you admire or are drawn to and write down what about them would you love to cultivate in yourself? Like what traits, qualities, characteristics, things that you admire in other people that you know, or maybe you know from afar, and what things would you love to cultivate for yourself? It is usually so helpful for our brains to see people that are living in a way that we want to. Like it proves to our brains that it's possible. If somebody else is living that experience, it also opens up the door to ourselves of, well, I know it's physically possible because I can see this example over here. But then your brain will also go to this space of why that's not for you or why you can't or why that person is so special or so different than you are. But the reality is it's such a helpful place to mine for the things that you are actually wanting to cultivate more of in yourself. And to have those tangible examples of it is possible. And these are usually things that are meaningful to us or the things that are important to us. We can oftentimes just see it so much easier in other people than we can ever see it in ourselves. And so it's a really helpful question of what are those things? And it's really just a helpful thing to have a list of the things or the ways that they make you feel or the things that you admire, and then taking it further into the action of what are the things that you are wanting to cultivate for yourself. This is not an exhaustive list, but hopefully this gives you some ideas and places to get started, especially if you feel like you're having a little bit of resistance to sitting down, or you don't know what to say, or you want to start a journaling practice, or you're not really sure how. It's been one of the most helpful things in my own life. And it's such a simple thing to do that's easily accessible. It's not fancy. It doesn't have to look a certain way, but it is one of the best tools to access how you're really wanting to live your life and how you're really wanting to show up. And that reflection point and checking in with yourself before we get sucked into the busyness of life and sucked into the to-do list and all these other things, when in fact, the things that you can find from doing something like this and asking yourself these questions and slowing down your life a little bit, you can get such great insight for yourself that only helps you grow more and gives you a little bit more of a direction and starting points for things of how you're really wanting to show up in your life, whether you use them this summer or at a future date. I hope this was helpful to hear. I love you guys so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. We'll see you back here next week. If you enjoyed this episode and want more like it, make sure you're subscribed to the Simply Real Life podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and maybe share it with a friend or two. That would mean the world.